So I'm Dale Henrichs, Gemstone Systems. I'm going to talk about tODE, a new development environment for glass. tODE stands for the Object-Centered Development Environment. I've been working in Smalltalk for a long time, and the class browser is a nice tool, but where are the objects in the class browser? When you look at the class browser, do you see objects? Can you touch objects? Okay? And I think the answer is no. So that's one of the focuses I've had in working on tODE. I've been working for 3 or 4 years on this. The other thing that is kind of my pet peeve is that developers should write more tools. All right? And the fact that all the Smalltalk tools are window-based makes a fairly high bar to be able to go in and do tools for your 5-class little thing. All right? Some menus, and what do you need to do? You need to do about 3 or 4 things, maybe set something up. That should be a tool. There should be some API there, some interface that you can use. And so there's a big gap between window-based tools and workspaces. All right, and we ship a lot of workspaces, but you have to go find the spot in workspace, and they're not the greatest thing in the world to use. We'll introduce glass, or talk about glass. It's the special Gemstone S64-bit license, where it's free for commercial use. There's a 2 CPU, 2 gigabit shared page cache, and unlimited repository size. And the other thing that distinguishes glass is there's a Faro suite compatibility layer to kind of make it easy to move from Faro to Gemstone for applications. And then GemTools. GemTools is the current development environment that's used for glass. And one of the important things to know about Gemstone is there is no native GUI for Gemstone. So every development environment is, by definition, a remote development environment. GemTools is about 6 years old. I think it will get one of the first things done. And it has poor performance over the WAN. And when you deploy your server apps out into the cloud or into ECM or some other remote development ISP, you can't have your development environment let you down. All right? That's the case with the current GemTools. So tODE is slotted to replace GemTools. So what we're looking at, we have poor performance, and we want to have poor WAN performance, and we want to have a remote development environment. And that actually sets up some conflicting requirements as far as I can tell. To get acceptable WAN performance, you might be inclined to build a fat client and basically manage your round trips to the server control that. But when you want to sit down with tODE and actually build custom tools, if you are actually doing a fat client approach, you end up building custom tools that are partly implemented on the client and partly implemented on the server. Now, I said that it should be easy to write tools, all right? And so you immediately set yourself up to have, okay, tools will definitely not be written. And the other thing I have in the middle there about debugger difficulties. For Gemstone, I've done several different implementations of tODE over the years. I've been doing this, aiming at this thing for 3 or 4 years. And the debugger, if you have a halt and you're using Seaside, for example, which is one of the early implementations, and you have a halt in your code, but it's part of the Seaside HTTP stack that's serving your development environment, it gets to be, you run into some problems there. And so there's some issues that you have to resolve. So customizable dev environment says go with a thin client, but then you have to do your tools differently, because you don't have the fat client, so how are you going to deal with that? And that's really what this talk is really going to be about. To address that problem, I basically said I'm going to just have to go in and be simple, just take a simplistic approach, all right? I'm starting from scratch. I have simple widgets for Windows. I decided not to have any menus. And I've got an object shell, and I'll go into the demo and we'll see how this all works. But the object shell is there to replace menu functionality. That's your first question. If I remove menus, how do I manipulate my objects? How do I work with that? Well, we'll see if my solution goes past you guys. And then actually the object shell gives you enhanced workspace functionality. All right. Because that's really, what I want you to think about when you're watching the shell is to think about it as if it was a workspace and what was going on there. So my simple widgets, I have single pane windows, no multi-pane windows, no multi-pane class browser. I have a text widget and a list widget. I got a couple text widgets. No menus, no buttons, no custom code on the client whatsoever, all right? So this is purely server environment. You write all the tools, you do everything you're doing in the server, yet everything you view is running in the client. I use the Faro window manager, so actually my thin client has a fairly high functioning window manager available. Let's see what I can do. So my object shell, all right? This is based on the Unix shell, all right? You know, ls, cd, different commands. But imagine an object shell, or a Unix shell, where all the commands are implemented in Smalltalk, and not bash or C. And imagine that all the objects in the directory structure, all the files in the directory structure are actually objects, all right? And executable files are written in Smalltalk, okay? So this is kind of like, what if Alan Kay and Stephen Bourne had gotten together in 1978 and said, you know, there's something we can do there. So what I'm going to do is go straight into the demo. I think the best way to see what's going on is for me just to drive this son of a gun. Let's see how I can speak. So this is Faro 1.4, and when I type a command, I actually log into a Gemstone server that's running on my laptop. So let me cd to /demo, and okay, we're logged in. Notice the return object there. Every shell command returns an object, and that happens to be a TD directory node. We'll get into that later. ls, and I see a couple things here. All right. The green class list. Well, let's edit that son of a gun. Is Smalltalk code. Okay. And it's a familiar workspace, except the nice thing about this, when I talk about an enhanced workspace, I've just got a named workspace that I can access that I can run the code by saying // class list. And I get an answer back in the red, okay? The next thing you want to do with arrays or whatever is inspect them. So I type the inspect command. Now what was going on there, all right? If you remember, well, if you know about the shell, you have object in, or standard in and standard out, and so you pipe things together. Well, what I'm doing with tODE is every command returns an object, and every command can take an object as input. In fact, I just keep a stack with like the last object, and I keep the last 10 objects in case you want to get back to it. But you basically have, so every command, when it fires up, in fact, what I'll do is I'll show you a command here. I have one here, it's called command. Oops. It's not time for the debugger yet. So this is the structure for a command, all right? And what you have is a block and then Smalltalk code, all right? And the arguments to the block are Topaz, which is the server object that's running the system. Obgen, mentioned Obgen, so that's available. The tokens, you can do more, you know, you can have command line tokens and those come in with that argument. And the window ID. I thought it was a good idea at one point in time. And it may actually go. But so let's go in here, and so I've got hello and I've got tokens. So, and I'm actually, you know, concatenating the tokens. So if I run the command, // stick, oops, hello stick v, all right? So I've now got a parameterized workspace, all right? So no more going back, finding the workspace, navigating down to the little section of code that you want to work with, and then editing the 5 or 6 different parameters that you want to change for the particular thing you want to run. You can set up a command to do that, all right, and write that. I can copy the command to new, and you know, so you know, this is kind of a, you know, for me this is really feeling powerful. I'm getting close to the objects. The shell was designed, all right, to essentially give you the ability to run arbitrary commands, all right, against arbitrary objects, all right, and so the shell has, what is it called, the redirect, all right? So I can sit down and say,
like to put that window near the top of the screen.
The top of the screen is going to, there's stuff going there in a little bit. But, let's see, how do I end that? Okay. So here I've just redirected the result into the file or directory, the object out. All right? And now you're beginning to maybe see a pattern here. I've got these named files. I've got stars. Those are executable. The slash, I can CD into that. So I've got a directory, but I've also got an object that I can CD into. So let's CD into that guy and see what we get. And DS is the command that I use to do an LS. If you do an LS, you get to see the instance variables, but not the values. So I added the DS to give you both the instance variables and the values. And if I say inspect dot, I actually get an inspector on that object. So now I can navigate around. I can go to class string, go to the string, look at dictionary, pop around in here, get back, work my way back up. The other thing, so I want close to the objects and I want tools, all right? So, we've got inspect, we've seen that go back and forth. Well, we haven't seen it go back and forth. I've seen it go to inspect, but not back to the shell. So I'm sitting on this meta class 3. If I hit the escape key, I open up a shell that's on the context of the inspector or whatever window I happen to be touching. And I can sit down and do a DS here. And I'm seeing, I should be seeing, let's see, did I get it? Oh yeah. So I've got the same stuff that was in the inspector. Now I can write commands like do it. And say self. What have I got here? I got a meta class. So again, we've just bounced around. I can write the expression. I don't have to create it. I don't have to create an object to put the expression in. I can just type do what's in line. And I got a character collection sitting here, and I can say inspect the character collection or the character collection class. Now we've looked at the inspector and we've looked at kind of the workspace, and now it's time to start looking at code. So there's a couple different ways to do that. The first one is I've got the inspector selected here, and the keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-V brings up a browser on the class of whatever object I'm inspecting in the window. And what I end up with is a hierarchy view, a class definition view, an instance view. Oops, I did lose that one. I'll pull this over. And the class. So you can see the instance methods, the class definition, and the hierarchy in one view. I don't have to click on buttons to go, I want to see the instance, I want to see the class, I want to see, bounce back and forth. So this, to me, now I've got a nice view of the object, the source code in the object. And of course, I can click on, on these things and look at the methods. And I've got, the standard kind of, let's see, implementers as a keyboard shortcut. Do these guys, senders. Oops. So you've got all the functionality of the class browser without all of the, in my opinion, in working with class browsers, one of the things when I just opened up, I've only opened up about 3 or 4 class browsers here. I've got 3 or 4 windows that are now littering my screen, and I may not, and I have to manage the windows. All right, my hand stayed on the keyboard as I went through this. I did some clicking, but I did directed clicking. I didn't have to go grab the window, move it around, make it, resize it so I can see what I want to see. In fact, I can see everything I want to see. All right, and these are individual windows. All right, and I'm reusing those windows over and over again. All right, so if you want to save something like a method, and you go, oh, I want to have a look at 2 methods at the same time, I have a command called Command-Shift-C, keyboard shortcut that lets you copy the method, or the window. It's actually copy any window. And let's go here, that guy copied. Let's go navigate around, Control-Shift-V, oops, that's the same thing.
So lots of keystrokes. Can you do like a shift drag or copy?
What I haven't done, all right, so, you know, earlier I said I'm doing something simple, all right? And so the theory is that I can add menus to this system, okay? I can add drag and drop, all right? But at this point in time, what I'm interested in doing is kind of not allowing myself to take the shortcut and go, oh, I can just add a menu, okay? Just, you know, instead of trying to solve the problem and address the problem. And, you know, so the thing is at this point in time, I'm not putting those in, but it's not because I'm, you know, I'm only myself. I've been working on this since I think I started September on this particular invocation, and I haven't built from scratch. But no, I want to keep it simple, and I think there's quite a bit of functionality there. Oh, we haven't seen the debugger yet. We haven't seen the debugger. Ah, yes, I had a whole script. Let's CD, so directory structure, all right? You know, the shell has directory structure, and what would you expect in a Smalltalk image for directory structure? You might think, oh, I'll go to Smalltalk, and well, I actually have something like that there, but I never use it. Right? So it turns out that the directory structure for the shell is really my working environment, all right? Where do I want to lay out? So I'm going to CD to home, all right, and show you this is where I work. I spent the last 2 months I've developed in this full time, all right, on the stuff I've been doing. And this is all the different projects I've got. I got a Metacello project, and this just has the stuff that I care about, and you know, some scripts that I use, some analysis. Let's look at that guy. This is text, right? And you just say text and can edit and paste text. Okay, this is a test suite. So it's the working environment. So that's what the shell is now, all right? This is where you organize your space, all right? And your working space, all right? The other thing a useful area is when you install programs, all right, or install projects. I've got a tools structure where actually right now these are the set of tools that I've got installed. And the idea is that when you load a project, you also get something in the tool structure. And if you see the test suite over here on the right, okay, that actually, well, what's that? You know, this is Smalltalk code that basically defines a test suite, all right? This is, you know, I don't know if anybody actually has written that code. They tend to use browsers to do that, but this is the code that you use to write test suite. But anyway, so this generates the test suite, and this actually generated code that is a test suite for all of the tools that are here. So to run a test suite, let me do a man test. So that's the other thing that commands have, is I've got a man page. So documentation that's not, you don't have to scrabble through class comments hoping to find something useful. Usefulness, the man page ought to be useful. Anyway, so it's, you do test, unit test file. So we'll just do that here. Let's say test suite. And I get some failures. Which, no, what do I do here? So I'm going to man TS, and it's going to tell me that I can say TS debug. I can use errors, failures, past, any of the categories of test failures. Or I can use a test spec or a method path. So I can actually debug individual test methods, like the debug menu in Parallel. And so what we'll do here is we'll TS. And of course, I get an error. This is what I expect to see. So I'll press the debug button. And what we've got here, this is actually the stack for the debugger. This is the method that we've got selected. And this is the context for that method. All right. There's the method context plus self as a TD test tool. And I can click around on here to navigate through the stack. That particular method window comes up is not reusing that space because it is the debugger. It's a separate environment. And I've got some keyboard. Well, all right. Let's man DB, and I've got a list of things I can do. I can set breakpoints, but I can do down into over. So if I close that and type commands, I can say DB. Let's see if I can do it there. actually, for this, I need to set a breakpoint underneath it.
You realize you got this error because you typed the command.
Oh, I did? No, I didn't realize that. Okay. I will fix that. No, no, it did.
You're supposed to
Oh.
make TSD on yours.
Ah, good catch. Okay, yeah, I'm getting the message now. There's the one that I'm expecting to see, which is tODE. So we edit that method, and I'll set a breakpoint here. Command K is the shortcut for doing that. Close the debugger, run this again, and I get a breakpoint counted. So now we can start using the shortcuts here. Step. Oops. I find man page to be real useful.
Yeah.
Step. Over. Now, the other thing I can do is use command key shortcuts, so command O is over as well. And now I've stepped into the halt method, according to the message not understood. So I've got a debugger, and the debugger is, while it doesn't look quite like the debugger you're familiar with, it has the basic functionality that you expect. And I can sit down over here and hit escape and be able to write expressions in the context of the debugger. So let's see. The other things, then I'll close the debugger. And browsing code, I'll show you man browse. And these are the list of possible browse methods that you can do. So you can browse a single method, a class. You can browse the diff between two methods. Browse a list, which is if you have a list of class definitions that you created programmatically, you can browse them. Browse a method, which is actually implementers, references. Our method is a regex search, and all methods that match a pattern. Our sender is sender's matching pattern. So you've got basically the full range of reference commands. I want to find implementers. I want to find senders. Let's see. Oh, yes, all right. So when you sit down and want, in our, I mentioned that you want to add a tool, and I showed you that the tools got added. So the question is, so how do I add a tool, and what does the tool look like for me? And so let's take a look at the PF command. All right, this controls the prop monitor. All right, and so prop monitor is Gemstone's profiling tool. And the way this thing is working, instead of passing in a block, I just start the prop monitor, do some things in the image, stop the prop monitor, look at a report. And that's what you see in the commands that can be done here. So we'll just exercise the guy first. PF start. Let's say PF stop. I want to have command completion, but I haven't done that yet. That's why I always do that in my real shell. And so what I've done here is just filtered the report to anything that's got over, I think, 100, 1,000 samples. And so this just basically shows, the results of the profile. And this is the output of the standard profile command for Gemstone. And so the question is, what does that look like? So I'm going to, let's see, I think maybe we'll do a file method. And, so here's the profile class that implements the profiling tool. And what I've got is on the class. See, I've got. So this is the class side methods. Where there's the PF command, and in fact, if you look at this, you recognize that that's the standard command structure. It's a block. In this case here, I've got a pragma that is used when the tool gets installed for actually installing the command in the standard system. So it's available for everyone. And then I've got a definition of the man page. And it's got and it was actually referenced by the pragma for the PF command. And then the implementation of start. Because, now this is actually probably better, documentation of the tool itself than, a workspace or something else where there might be more code that you have to wade through. And that combined with the prop monitor, the man page. I think I covered just I covered everything. Yeah. So that's the end of my demo. And let's see back here. And so where I'm at is the current incarnation of tODE is running on Pharaoh 1.4 and Gemstone 3.1. Like I said, I've done 100% code-based development for the last couple months, and found the system definitely usable. And I'm expecting to release tODE within next year, or before the end of the year. And I guess that's it. So hopefully I gave you a flavor of what's going on. Yeah.
Is what you've written useful as a tool for doing the same exact thing on top of, say, Pharaoh without Gemstone at all?
I've started that port. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, because I like tODE so much that when I find myself having to work in Pharaoh and I can't use tODE, then I sit down. So I started that port. I guess I didn't cover. I should mention that the way the system works is I'm not going to get into that. It's enough. Any other questions? Oh yeah.
Why do you use blocks in the methods that define command? Why don't you use arguments in the method itself, like the PF method that you just showed?
Yeah. What I'm doing is I'm returning the block in that particular case.
Yeah, I know, but why?
Because okay. The commands in the system are actually stored in a dictionary. All right. So what's happening is you're installing the PF command when you execute this method. Okay. And so what's going on is I have a dictionary where I'm installing the PF command with this block. And I'm doing the indirection so that you can choose to say, I want to change how the PF command behaves. And so I don't want you to have to subclass the profile tool. I don't want you to have to edit the profile command to change it. I want you to say, I'm going to add a new command and basically replace the current PF. So
my question was because I think I did something similar some years ago where I created methods that return blocks, and these methods are collected with pragmas. But instead of executing the methods to get to the blocks, you could also just store like a message send to this method. So if you modify the method, then you don't have to restart your whole system to install the new block.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're going with that. And the thing is, I do want blocks out there. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess the thing is, what I'd have to do is install the instance. I mean, like who's the receiver of the message that I'm going to send in a particular case? Because it's going to change over time if I install new commands. I mean, I'm just installing the entire class. Is that what you're saying? Class ID? I guess I'm not
it's
following.
more like you store something that knows when I execute this command, then I have to call this method, and not.
But I have to have a receiver, and that's
of course.
Yeah. And what I want to do is avoid involving a particular receiver that the central system needs to know about. So that's why I'm using the blocks. Yeah.
One of the things you can do to answer that objection is you factor out the content block, even if not. And, you know,
Well,
that
that's
particular
exactly
command
what's,
pattern might
well,
be
and that's what's
very
actually done here is, you know, this is the pattern that's being used is basically create an instance of self and send the message. So this block never gets recompiled. I mean, yeah, that's actually, you know, there's kind of a progression that you run through in using these kinds of commands. Well, you'll start with a 5-line method with a block in it, you know, or a 5-line block method. But as soon as you get that 8, 9, 10 lines in that method, you need to actually create a class. And so now you're going to just route to that class. And that happens when I'm building custom tools, not necessarily commands for general use. Right? And I wanted to have the same mechanism for basically building commands that sit in the shell, you know, without instances, you know, floating around, you know. And
But it's a cross-site, so the instances are cross-site.
but when I write a command, when I edit and create the class that I've got, that I sit in, that I put into the command, you know, here, like, let me show you. Okay. Maybe we should talk offline for that, because maybe I'm not understanding. Let's see. Let's see. So that command is just sitting in space. There is no necessary receiver to send a message to. I don't have a class. I don't have an instance of anything. So in that particular case, it is a naked block sitting, you know, in a directory structure. And I wanted to have, I didn't want to be changing mechanisms that say, oh, I use blocks here and you use messages there. And so, you know, at this point in time, that's, you know, I'm just settling on that as a, you know, common pattern, just to simplify. You know, when do I do different things? But the truth is that this mechanism is evolving, over time as well. And you know, I look at it. You know, for me, the object shell is like 6 months old. All right, the unit shell is 30 years old. You know, and so there's plenty of room for evolution and where this thing could go. All right, but for me, the important thing, all right, is to have the command. Be able to have this kind of mechanism, and you know, like I say, there's a gap for all of us small talkers in all the tools between a workspace and, you know, a window-based or browser-based tool. And you know, I think this kind of approach with you know, sitting down and acknowledging that maybe, you know, the shell might be something that, you know, can add some value to the development environment, and then, you know, where it goes and how it goes. Well, that is something that will change over time. Any other questions?
Can we get back to the last page with references?
Sure. Yeah.
Now, did I understand correctly that this is a tool that you are using yourself now? Do you have any co-conspirators that are working with this as well?
I haven't been able to get anybody else to break out the time to do this. It's the motivation is to replace gem tools, and I've got several people that are have volunteered to be guinea pigs, and I'm looking for more guinea pigs. Although, frankly, right now, I'm still in flux. All right, you know, some of these concepts that I showed you today are like, you know, 2 weeks old. All right, you know, they keep every time I talked in small talks about tODE, and the week before the talk, the notion of a shell, you know, appeared. And so I had a week to go, well, let's see what the shell looks like. And then I gave my talk. So there's been some concepts here that in preparation for this talk, you know, just came out of space, and you know, for parts of the talk that you didn't see, but I still went through the process of saying, you know, this needs to be done this way. And so, but it's fully functioning, so I really have to call a halt on continuing to push forward and change things. I need to basically sew it up, but I do need to make a pass and clean up some of the things that I've learned just recently.
It's very interesting work.
You know, like I say, I think that notion of the shell is just, you know, an object shell is very appealing, and think, when, where it goes and how it goes, I don't really care right now, but I gotta push an implementation out there. And this, the nice thing here is, GemTools is based on the browser, and it is very chatty with the update messages that go across the wire, okay? And with GemTools, from logging in from home, I basically hit, when I'm working on the LAN, all right, like on my laptop, the performance of GemTools is equal to what I get with tODE when I run from home over the WAN, all right? So roughly in the same thing. And when I use GemTools from home over the WAN, I don't, all right? It's just impossible to use. So that piece of it is the real, the real reason for doing this was to set things up so that we could do remote development and have a full tool set available, and yet run that tool over the WAN.
You're opening a lot of windows. Do you find that those windows get cluttered after a while? Do you close them frequently?
Huh?
And do you find that some of them get out of context? Like, here's a window, what's it connected to?
Let's see. One of the difficulties was that the layout got screwed up by having a too big a font. But the whole layout is done in a grid, so you really don't, they only move if you move them, all right? And I do stack up some of the windows, like I do implementers, they stack up, but they're very easy to clean up because you click on the X button and it goes right down the stack. Right? And I think I showed you the Command C stuff. When I do move windows, it's actually good because I wanted to preserve the context. So the fact that windows that I don't care about get reused is fine. And because not every one of those windows, like the entire browser, reuses windows, so they don't stack up. So it really is, kind of this nice mix of some of the things where I might want context. So doing senders, implementers, that stack is something you might actually riffle through and want to push through and keep some context. Whereas the class browser, because you can use Command-Shift-B and bring yourself the browser to you, because that's really what's going on. I'm looking at this object, I want to see its methods. Command-Shift-B, I'm now seeing what I want to see. All right? And so, that is throwaway because it's just the information. And so I find actually that I don't take the hierarchy guide, copy that hierarchy list off, and stash it off to the side. There's more room than the normal size, and stack up 3 or 4 of those, and that's my context. I just care about a couple lists of classes. In fact, you can write a shell expression that says here's the list of classes I want to look at, so you can actually have custom class lists that you can use. And that's stuff I put into my development environment. So.
I just had a syntax question about mixing, the shell is very kind of command, basically verb first, whereas Smalltalk is always noun first. Does that ever create cognitive dissonance in you?
Well, not really, because I'm used to using the shell. So you switch a context and go in and say I'm running a shell command. I don't when I actually sit down at Bash or in Linux, I don't get confused. All right. And so that window is the only place, the shell windows, this is why I wanted it positioned in one spot, because if I'm going to go to a shell, I go to my, down here. In fact, if my Pharaoh foo was better, it would actually have a black background with green characters on it. So it looks different, all right? But one of the things I did do is I have in there, I had a shell script object that you would put, a series of commands, shell commands in. And I'm going to throw that away, all right? Because now you get into this case of, being restricted to object in and object out for chaining together a series of commands. Nobody wants to do that. I don't want to do it, because you've got your hands tied, all right? So the answer is if you're going to script something, all right, then what you do is you create a little command block and do the scripting in there. And that was one of the things that actually came up in my in the recent work is, so I've got named commands and I've got a dictionary of blocks, all right? Well, what I can do is I can send a message to Topaz, the server, to say, give me an instance of the tool for the PF command. So now, the two things happen. I've got access to the object that, in Smalltalk that I wouldn't have gotten with the PF command, but it's even better because now I can send it messages. And the second thing that happens is when you know someone's going to use your tool that way, you will write your commands such that you do your parsing of arguments and setting up, and then you call a method that is actually doing the work. So, my PF example was incorrect. I said PF start, and I didn't start in line in the method. All right, I should have called another method. All right, now start maybe is not a thing, but if there's arguments and things like that. So, but so the point is I don't want to encourage writing scripts in the scripting language. It is a mechanism for like generating menu items and putting actions on guide. And it really is that. I said menu items because that's what the commands are replacing. And you don't have to sit down. I mean, I find myself in a classic Smalltalk environment of going, I know the command I want to run, and here's the object I'm looking at, but I don't have it on that menu. So you end up navigating to the window that has the menu item that you want to apply to the object you're looking at. Then you navigate to the same object, and then you do the menu item. So the whole idea of the shell is I short circuit. I know what I want to do. Type the command or do man, and find it. So, you have questions? Okay.
How do you create the man pages?
Pardon? It's just source code that it's created as part of the tool in the class. I'll show you. Yeah, so go ahead and ask me questions and come and grab me, for any context here.